Several months have passed since John and I had dealt significant damage to the agency. And because of that very fact, life has become far less eventful. Well, I use that term loosely. I still hunt and kill other cryptids, mainly for food or to protect innocents, those who pose a threat to humanity and the well-being of societies. And now, John and I have a new ally, the Wendigo I had freed as a part of a deal and promise I made. Her name is now Arya. She turned out to actually be female, from the small traces of memory she still held from her days of being human. That's what she had told me. I taught her the ways of using resistance and knowing when certain amounts of force were necessary at certain times. John became more comfortable being around Arya, although at first he was opposed to me freeing her. He soon learned there were more benefits than setbacks to doing so. She was a positive asset to have around. For those of you who may wonder what happened to the helicopter pilot, we let him go, making sure to drop him off far away from the location we were currently using as a home. We haven't seen the agency since the last time we were at Site 12. The helicopter we flew here did possess a tracker, so I picked it up, carried it, and threw it into the sizable river after we let the pilot go. It sank to the bottom immediately, although the strong current did begin to pull it apart into smaller chunks, effectively destroying any chance of it being tracked. The location John had taken us to was an abandoned spot towards the more undeveloped side of the city. We sat surrounded by forests and fields, cloaking us from most nearby public roads and transportation routes. John had known about this place when he was a kid. He recounted tales of how his mother used to drag him here whenever she made appointments. That is, before they shut down. John even took his own daughter here a few times, before the tragedy of what happened to her. He said, unlike with his mother, he actually enjoyed coming here with her and seeing the look of joy spread across her face. But now that most of the surrounding area had been overtaken by nature over the span of nearly a decade, nobody gave the structure a second glance. Although I'm sure the sight of either me or Arya would be enough to send them running. One day in particular, I had taken Arya out with me to go hunting for a new supply of food, mainly for John, who only had about 4 meals worth of sustenance left. He stayed behind in the spa, this time far more confident, due to him having an assault rifle he picked up of an agent I had knocked out a while back during a confrontation at the cabin. John also had finally gotten rid of his lab coat, switching it out for an old black long-sleeve sweater and pair of jeans he discovered while scouting around inside the spa. Since both Arya and I were around, John hasn't had to fire his rifle up to this point, meaning that there were still plenty of bullets left for him to use. This particular forest north of the spa had a much less flat terrain than the previous few I had been to during these past several months. Some hills were steep, so much so that bringing a human along wouldn't do much good anyway. Arya looked at me as we both scanned through the tree line, looking for any potential prey items. "The human," she stated, shifting her way around a boulder. "Why does he not fear you?" I smiled, allowing my teeth to be shown as I crawled forward. "He did at first. They always do. Dr. John is a good man, a friend to both of us. I promise you can trust him," I assured her. She tilted her deer skull to the left, seemingly trying to look away. "I have killed so many of them," came her loud whisper. "So many humans. Do you think the rest could ever exist with you and I without conflict?" I stopped for a second, my claws sinking slightly into the dirt beneath us as I contemplated my response. "No," I said bluntly. "There will most likely never be peace between cryptid and man. Not completely. But neither is completely wrong or right in their assumption of the other." Arya stood, seemingly saddened but satisfied with my answer. I could tell she felt the same thing deep down. "How did you know you hate them?" she inquired, now looking me directly in the eyes. "The humans," I don't hate them, but some are corrupted, I replied. Back before I found my path away from the agency, a cryptid whom I had been sent to destroy murdered the men who were my comrades at the time, as I was forced to watch. After which, he told me that I needed to discover who I truly am, what I can do, why the humans in power try to hide our existence from the rest. He was correct with his assessment. The only true reason I killed him was because he was slaughtering innocents. Arya seemed stunned by my monologue, keeping her sunken eyes trained in front as we both took in the landscape around us. "Then, why did you rescue me?" she asked. I took a couple of steps closer, letting the slight breeze in the forest pass between us. It was a good question. That much was true. Because now I see the truth. Monsters are made on the inside, not out. You overcame your bloodlust. Despite your programming and what humanity claims you are, you have shown that you can be different. That you have the will to overcome what you're supposed to be, and instead, act as you want to be. Just as I overcame what the agency that created me to be, a ruthless killing machine. You have overcome what humanity has painted you to be, a bloodthirsty monstrosity. Arya slightly backed up, not knowing how to respond. I stepped forward and let a claw rest on her shoulder, to which she seemed to be reassured, looking over my shoulder in what almost appeared to be shame. "I still have very much to learn, Bron," she announced softly, shooting a glance toward the ground. "We all do," I replied, both men and cryptid alike. It was when I looked past Arya, I caught a glimpse of something strange near one of the trees behind her. Something that looked as if it definitely didn't belong. Not out here. "What is it, Bron?" she asked me curiously, sniffing the air as I pointed towards the site. I did the same, now picking up the scent of what was rotting flesh. "Be on your guard," I told Arya. "We may not be alone." On all fours, I crawled across the terrain and followed the smell, as well as the sight. Arya stayed close behind, keeping a watch behind us in the event of a sneak attack from someone or something. As I got closer, it became obvious what was creating the aroma. A body, that of a dead human woman. She had been there for a couple of days, due to the way her flesh was deteriorated. I moved to the side so Arya could see the body as well, neither of us being disgusted, but rather intrigued. This could mean a potential cryptid was out here with us. The corpse was laid up against the tree, strands of her hair still falling from a rotting scalp. Her clothes were torn and ripped, along with multiple remnants of what looked to be pierced and gash wounds in her arms and chest. Her eyes had been completely separated from her sockets, leaving nothing but two empty holes. "There's competition in these woods," Arya snarled, getting into a more combative stance. "No," I told her. "This was more than likely a human, or something even more intelligent." "What makes you so sure, Bron?" she said, turning her deer skull to glance at me. "I've encountered many beings throughout the years, most of which eat their kills, just like us. There have been exceptions, but this seems like pure malice, nothing more than a warning or a trophy. We should find whatever has done this and put a stop to it," she snarled, "before it attacks us first." "Precisely," I responded. "Perhaps we've stumbled upon unwelcome territory, something that saw us at home and no longer wants us here." Arya and I continued to search the forest, going up and down hills, past ponds, and through lines of bushes. For a while, it seemed as if nothing was there. Whatever had done that to the unfortunate lady was now long gone. We were soon about to give up, until we heard a scream. A truly deafening scream of pure terror and desperation. One that couldn't be faked or feigned. It came from someone in trouble. Someone who needed help. Both of us stopped. I was the first to stand and quickly pinpoint the source of the wailing. "This way." I motioned for Arya to follow me east. Soon enough, more voices could be heard, mumbling on and on about something. Something clearly important. If it were two humans out here instead of Arya and I, then this mysterious screaming woman would have more than likely not gotten any help. Her scream wouldn't have been picked up by the ears of just a man. Arya and I came upon a makeshift campsite. A circle of tents all set up neatly, with a blazing fire in the middle, the flames being well over 3 feet high. Around the fire stood 12 humans, a mixture of both male and female individuals, all dressed in similarly black robes. Above the flames were what appeared to be a metallic slab, big enough to lay multiple humans down on. Immediately, Arya stepped back, holding her claws up in front of her face, as she tried to look elsewhere. Fire. It was the fire that bothered her. Fire is one of the main weaknesses a Wendigo has, most of which fear it deeply, especially when it's in a high volume like this. I myself didn't have much to worry about. I was extremely resistant to high and low temperatures, and fire has never truly bothered me, even when the flames have come into contact with my skin. "No," Arya hissed. "No fire. Please, no fire." I turned around, seeing the discomfort in her expression. "I know what fire does to you, but you have to overcome your fear. We need to find out what they are up to," I said quietly, doing my best to calm her down. More screams interrupted us. I turned back to the campsite. 2 of the black-robed people were dragging a young woman towards the fire. She only seemed to have just hit her adult years. They stopped dragging her just feet from the fire. One of the bigger black-robed people stepped out from the circle and into the middle, raising his hands in the air as the woman begged for mercy. "Please, I'll get out of here and never come back. I promise, mister. Ain't nobody gotta even know what I saw," she pleaded, looking up at the man. Speaking of the man, his eyes were a color of blue, similar to that of my skin. A dark midnight blue. His brown hair was long enough to reach his waist. A thick, unkempt and curly beard had formed around his face, obscuring his cheeks, chin, and most of his neck. He looked down toward the young woman, anger seething in his eyes. Even through the material of the rope, I could tell he possessed quite a lot of muscle mass. His shoulders were broad, his legs were girthy, and his facial structure appeared quite chiseled underneath that beard. The young woman herself possessed short black hair, only reaching to about her shoulders. Her attire consisted of ripped-up jeans, a red and white square-patterned shirt, black leather boots that were covered in dirt and mud. This woman here has seen us, knows of us, what it is we look and sound like. To all of you, my brothers and sisters, let her be yet another example when outsiders come lurking where they do not belong," said the ungroomed leader. The long-haired man waved a finger at the 2 black-robed people who dragged the young woman. They tightened their grip and began to drag her once more, preparing to throw her onto the metallic slab above the flames. Without thinking, I dropped to all fours and charged into the small crowd, now revealing myself and giving away the element of surprise. To my shock, none of the black-robed people scattered or ran. They simply fell to their knees, holding their hands together as they try not to look me directly in the eye. All except for one. The long-haired man. "You will leave the woman be," I growled, baring my teeth and waving my claws around. The black-robed people all stood back up and slightly separated, creating an opening in the circle. The long-haired man took a few steps back, seemingly not truly afraid of me, but also not foolish enough to physically challenge me, which would be suicidal on his end of things. "Take the girl, get her out of here and back to the chapel. I'll keep the freak distracted." I grabbed the bearded man by the shoulder and lifted him up to eye level. He kicked and resisted, but refused to plead or beg. The last man who uttered that insult to me perished. I would advise you not to meet his same fate, I snarled, the glow of my eyes reflecting in his. Oh please, you won't have time to make me suffer when you'll be far too busy with Helena, he cackled, just before proceeding to whistle loudly in a specific pattern. A pattern meant to get the attention of someone or something. The black robe people all grabbed the woman and lifted her up. She violently kicked and screamed as they restrained her, begging to be let go as she thrashed around in desperation. I could hear the sounds of rapid snapping and wood crunching coming from my right. But it wasn't just twigs or branches. No, entire trees were being ripped apart. But the mass coming, not to mention its scent was horrendous. A combination of spoiled meat and black smoke. Still keeping the man held tightly in the air, I turned my head back over to Arya, still cowering from the fire. I knew she wanted to help, but her fear had seemingly gotten the best of her. I had a plan in mind. "Go after them and retrieve the woman," I shouted. "I'll deal with this." Arya responded by leaping across the ground and into the trees, following the black-robed people as they attempted to run away with the still screaming victim. They wouldn't have the slightest chance of outrunning her, so I was confident it wouldn't take long. She was much more comfortable performing the task that didn't involve being near the fire. I tossed the long-haired man to the side. He simply continued laughing as he slammed into one of the trees not far in front of us and fell onto the ground, dirt finding its way into his beard and hair as he groaned from the pain of the impact. "You are scum," I remarked to him. "Killing innocent women. You are no man who deserves the privilege of life." The long-haired man wiped some blood from his chin as he smiled, looking over to the entity that was on its way to me. "And neither do you, monster," he shot back. "I can only see one monster here," I barked. Looking to my right, I spotted what could only be described as what appeared to be a mutated wolf-like cryptid, charging full speed at me. Its fur was a light yellow color, contrasting with the mostly green and brown palette of the forest. Its not two, but three eyes leaked out of void-like darkness of some sort, as if they were black holes within the creature's head. Its long pointed ears stood tall and perked up on the back of its head, giving the impression it was ready for a fight. The most noticeable feature of all was just its sheer size. On all fours, the back of the canine reached up just below my neck, meaning that its quadrupedal height was nearly 8 feet high, a truly massive creature. The monstrous canine, who I now knew was the Helena entity the long-haired man talked about, stopped only about 10 feet away from me. She exhaled, baring her jagged and deformed teeth at me as I watched air escape its way from her nostrils. She then shifted her gaze and pointed her snout at the long-haired man, as if waiting for orders on what to do, no different than in the position I once was not very long ago. The man stood and groaned, his back still heavily aching from the force I had thrown him with. Now that his protection was here, he seemed much more content in his expressions towards me. "Kill the blue one," he commanded, pointing one of his scarred fingers at me. "We can't let him destroy what we are trying to create." The long-haired man then turned and dashed off into the forest, but not in the direction of the other black-robed people. No, he went the opposite way, more than likely because he wanted to avoid the wrath of Arya, which I found odd considering his content in being thrown like a toy. Or he was more than likely returning to the chapel he had spoken of beforehand. I could hear screams of terror and more than likely pain in the direction the black-robed people had run off with the kidnapped woman, signaling that Arya had caught up with them in mere seconds and was already getting to work taking them down and rescuing their victim. I turned my attention back to Helena, attempting to try the less violent approach at first to calm the tension, something I had rarely ever done with cryptids in the past. "This is not a battle you want to seek. You can be more than what he tells you that you are. You must believe me," I said, keeping my guard up as I spoke, not wanting to be attacked while not expecting it. Helena only continued to maliciously snarl at me, clearly not invested or interested in what it is I had to say. I still figured getting to her psychologically was worth a try, all things considered. But I still needed to defend myself, as well as eat. I quickly realized that attempting to talk her down would only be a waste of my energy. So, I had to do what I was more familiar with. I went on the offensive, reaching over and tearing the thickest branch I could spot on the tree near me, following it up by lunging at Helena. Helena opened her jaws wide as I came within range and leapt forward at me with a lunge of her own. I swung the branch vertically in an uppercut-like motion, colliding my arbitrary weapon with her neck area. The force of the impact caused her to be thrown onto her back. I seized the opportunity and pounced onto her stomach. As I was wrestling and keeping the huge canine restrained, I heard Arya call out to me. "Bron, I've got the woman. I'm coming to assist you," she bellowed, confirming she had made quick work of the Black Robe people, although it was unclear at the moment whether or not she had killed them. "No, get her back home," I shouted back, not even turning around to see Arya. Helena continued to howl and bark, attempting to shake me off of her. I slashed one of her front legs with my claws, causing her to writhe in pain as a green, almost mucus-colored blood burst its way out through the stump. At one point, Helena had turned over to the side and onto her belly in an attempt to crush me with her weight. Little did she know, it was a pointless strategy, one that would only make matters worse for her. I lifted her up and tossed her behind me. Helena was sent crashing through multiple trees and sliding across the dirt on the ground, finally stopping when she impacted with a boulder sticking out from the ground, causing chunks of rocks to fly in nearly every direction. I dropped onto all fours and charged at her as she was recovering, leaping onto her with enough force to send us both crashing through the remaining mass of the boulder. We tumbled down a hill behind the boulder together, Helena still barking and snarling at an obnoxious volume during our chaotic descent. Grass, plants, bushes were all trampled in our path. We both attempted to dig our way into the dirt for traction as we continued our fall. But we were going at a speed too great to completely latch ourselves on. We eventually hit the bottom, a shallow stream of splashed water beneath us after impact. Helena was the first to recover from the whole ordeal. She charged, slightly limping due to a missing leg, and proceeded to headbutt me as soon as I was on my feet, then quickly following it up by biting me in my right leg and viciously throwing me to her left. I roared from the sensation of her monstrous teeth sinking into my flesh as I collided with a hill of dirt. She charged once again. I reacted quickly and wrapped my claws around her snout, preventing her from opening her mouth to bite me again. After which, I vertically maneuvered my arm while I still kept her snout firmly grasped, forcing her to have to look up. Once she did, I seized the opportunity and slashed my claws in a horizontal fashion across her throat. Blood exploded from her wounds. Her once powerful and dominant howl was now reduced to nothing but a gurgling whimper as she fell to the ground in a defeated manner. Helena lay there breathing heavily as she looked up at me, clearly in far too much agony to get back up and continue the fight. She went on to whimper as her green blood leaked itself out from the gashes in her throat. I reached the claw over towards the back of her head and tore it completely off in order to speed up her death, not wanting her to have to suffer any longer. Her movement ceased. Blood poured out from below her snout, and her cries of pain had come to an end. I threw Helena's severed head behind me, not wanting to look into those black holes of eyes any longer. After which, I sniffed the air for the scent of the Black Robe people. All I could pick up was the potent scent of iron. Now that the battle was over, it was clear to me what the source of that iron was, and it wasn't the blood of Helena. These people had already proven themselves to be much worse than even most personnel in the agency, especially the long-haired man, torturing and killing a woman for more than likely for some petty religious reasoning, even coming close to doing it again. Who knows how many previous victims they've had. I had no issue if Arya ended up killing them, considering the heinous deeds they were up to when we had stumbled upon them. I should have put an end to the long-haired man when I had the chance. I hesitated for far too long, and it cost me. But I was grateful we had saved a life today. Although it was unfortunate we couldn't save the dead woman we had discovered. Nonetheless, Arya and I were successful with keeping that woman from one of the worst fates known to humanity. Not that I could have the experience myself, but I've seen human beings burned alive before. Mainly men back at the agency when we were out on a mission and encountered a cryptid with fire-related abilities. They're wretched and relentless, screaming as their skin blisters and chars. They're kicking and writhing as their bones boil underneath their flesh that's being slowly cooked. It's a sight only something truly evil could receive joy from, and I for sure did not. I did try one last time to detect the scent of the long-haired man to no avail. He had gotten too far out of range for me to pick his scent up. For a man who seemed so content at the prospect of his own demise, he was also a colossal coward at the same time. I figured I should get back to the spa with John, Arya, and the woman. It was no use staying out here and attracting the attention of whatever called this particular area of the forest home, especially when I had a fresh body sitting at my feet. Although, maybe this forest wasn't as populated with cryptids as I was imagining, considering it seemed like nothing had come to devour the remains of the woman Arya and I had discovered. All the commotion and chaos had made me forget that I was hungry, so I picked up the headless corpse of Elena and brought it with me, carrying her lifeless body over my left shoulder, ignoring the stinging sensation in my leg left over from the bite I received during our battle. John would have to eat whatever was left over and share it with the woman, as not only was Elena's corpse mainly for Arya and I to feast upon, but it was highly unlikely John or the woman would be appetized by it anyway. Once I had arrived back at the spa, John had let me in. A fire was going toward the middle of the mostly vacant floor. The woman we had saved sat next to it, an old ragged blanket wrapped around her as she stared at the flames. Arya was back towards the far corner of the building, not wanting to be near the fire. The woman instinctively leaned back when she saw me enter, still slightly frightened at my presence. "You saved me," she said with a whimper, darting her eyes between Arya and I. "But why? Don't things like you eat folks?" "Only the ones that are jerks," John joked, attempting to lighten the mood. I kept my distance from her while John heated her up some of his food, not wanting to scare her any further. She was already extremely shaken up from whatever those people had done to her. But the important thing was that she was still alive and here to tell her tale. "It's okay. They won't hurt you. They're good. I promise. You see the blue guy over there?" John asked rhetorically, punctuating by pointing at me. "He saved my ass on multiple occasions. His name is Braun. We go back a decent bit. He's really down to earth for a cryptid that can lift a dang helicopter over his head." The woman raised a shaky hand into the air, keeping her gaze focused on the corpse of Elena I had hanging over my shoulder. "Hey there, Braun. I'm Jenny," she said weakly. "Hello," I said bluntly, before motioning over to Arya. "This is Arya," I followed up. "She's Wendigo," Jenny finished. "My pops used to tell me stories about Wendigos. Always kept my butt up in bed with nightmares. But you only seem vicious when you need to be. Can't believe you saved me from those evil folks." John adjusted the blanket on the woman. "They are both some powerful creatures," John announced. "I've seen it firsthand, but if you leave them be, you have nothing to fear. They only want to protect you, I promise." Arya seemed even more pleased by what John had said than I did, considering it took him more time to trust and warm up to her. I signaled over to Arya to follow me outside, my plan being for the two of us to feast out there, while the woman calmed down and sat with John. I laid the corpse down on the overgrown lawn in the front, all sorts of weeds and plants sprouting up from what used to be a parking lot. Arya and I began to tear into our meal, even at one point getting into a petty tug of war over the deceased creature's small intestine. It wasn't long before we had reduced Helena down to a stack of blood-covered bones. Only the tiniest strings of flesh and tendons remained on her body. I stared off into the forest, the sun now starting to descend as evening approached. Arya turned to look at me. Splatters of green blood covered the snout of her deer skull. "Do you think we can trust her, Bronn?" she asked, still finishing off the last bit of meat from a bone she held in her claws. "I'm not sure, but I'm sure we can trust her far more than those depraved humans who are going to roast her alive." Arya dropped the bone, turning and looking away as she did so. "I'm sorry I didn't assist you at first. The fire just," Arya said, sounding defeated. "You did well," I said, turning my head to look at her. "You saved Jenny. That was a great help in itself. If you can overcome your strongest bloodlust, you can overcome your greatest fear." I paused, using my right claw to scrape out a piece of flesh stuck between my teeth. "Did you kill the ones in black?" I inquired. "Some," Arya responded. "Does that anger you, Bronn? I remember what you said, the promise I was made to keep." "No," I replied immediately. "They are corrupted, even beyond the agency. They are far more monster than men. I told you that killing those who incite conflict with you or innocence are exceptions. I was close to killing the leader myself. They are merciless, cruel, and nothing short of evil." Arya pointed a fingernail towards my injured leg, which had already begun to heal. The pain was still there, however. I did my best to put it off and focus on the discussion at hand. "You're bleeding, Bronn," she announced. "It'll heal soon enough, but I thank you for your concern." Arya looked forward, as if to contemplate and think of what she was going to say next. There was a silence between the two of us, neither of us having much to say or talk about. It wasn't like my time with John. The two of us always usually had something on our minds that we wanted to speak about. But this was much different. Even inside, I could hear the mumbles of John and Jenny, but purposely tuned it out. However, it appears whatever it was they talked about was important, as John had stepped outside to get Arya and I's attention. "Bronn, Arya?" he called to the both of us. "We gotta talk." The two of us swiftly followed John inside. He seemed to have a bit of a haste in his step, clearly wanting to inform Arya and I of whatever it was as quickly as possible. Since he had finished cooking for both him and Jenny, we put the fire out for the sake of Arya, wanting to have her full attention on the conversation and not concentrating on avoiding the flames. "Jenny?" John said, inching his body closer to hers. "Can you tell them what you told me?" Jenny perked up and nodded, seemingly in a much better mental state than earlier. She looked around the circle at the three of us, becoming more comfortable in our presence, mainly warming up to specifically me, as I'm the one she spent the least amount of time with at this point. "I live on a farm not far from here," she began. "It was given to me after my pops had died. He was killed by something that was no man. Far from it." "Did it look like me?" Arya interjected. "Nah, I wouldn't know if it was a Wendigo. This thing, the thing that killed my pops, it was one ugly son of a gun. But that's not what I'm here to tell y'all." "I'm sorry," John added. "My daughter was taken from me. I know how it feels to lose someone." Jenny looked at John, letting a smile emerge on her face. "I bet she was a wonderful little ball of sunshine," she told him, causing John to mimic her smile. "The black-robed people," I said. "Tell us about them. They are now a threat to all of us, and we need to learn more." Jenny locked her hands together, letting out a heavy exhale before she spoke. "I go into town often, getting supplies and such. A few days ago, I hauled myself over to the library, Just thought it would be dandy to have a good book around when I was finished with the farm work. Anyway, I saw this older gal towards the back. She looked real shaky and nervous, even frightened if I'm really pushing it. I tried to ask her what was the matter, but she said it would only make things worse if she blabbed. Blabbed about what? John asked, desperate for an answer. Something about the folks in the black robes. I don't know what they did at the time to scare her so bad. I offered to get the cops involved or find her some help, but she begged for me not to do that. Said it would only stir the pot more and make her predicament worse. Told me she saw something she wasn't supposed to, and they were coming for her. Did you try helping her, regardless of her not desiring it? I questioned. I very much did, but they came for her not too long after that. I tried to stop them while they carried her out the back doors of the building, and they took me too after I jumped in the mix, blindfolded and gagged the both of us. Said that if we told us all, they would get our folks too, make them watch us die before they did the same to them. They tracked us out here and killed the other gal. They were waiting a few days to cook me while I was kicking. The day came and they were going to do it. That's when your two strange but helpful friends came to save me. The four of us all shared glances, darting our gazes around the room just before John raised the question we were all pondering about. So, they're a cult. Do you know what it is they worship or want? John quizzed. Jenny shook her head vigorously, indicating what John said was far from correct. Nah, not at all. There's something more evil than that, more complicated. Their goals are bigger than just some demon worship or ritual. I reckon they'll be back faster than you can say the word cult, and in bigger numbers. I don't know much, but I heard a lot of voices while I was blindfolded. They definitely got more than just 13. The one with the long hair. I began. Do you know his name? I heard a few of those weirdos say something like Yubel, but I can't be too sure. Never really been too sharp with my memory ever since I was kicked by a cow when I was a little girl. Yubel. The name kept repeating itself in my head. I hadn't even known of his existence for more than several hours, yet his name still provoked a deep rage within me. The same feeling of rage only Dr. West had ever been able to bring to the surface. The four of us continued to converse throughout that evening. Eventually, nighttime came, and John and Jenny went to sleep. I was unable to fall asleep and get the couple of hours I usually desired. So I went outside, crawled up a nearby tree, and simply looked out over the surrounding area. Arya came with. She sat at the bottom. We exchanged a few looks as we both sifted through our own thoughts. I thought about a lot, contemplated the events of my life over the past several months, wondered about where I would be if I had altered certain decisions. I do not regret most of my choices, especially leaving behind my former life as what amounted to being a cryptid mercenary. But one thing is for sure. I know that there would eventually come a day where I'm not able to keep myself hidden from the world anymore. And on that same day, everything I know would be in jeopardy. I thought back to when this all started. The day I encountered the yellow tentacle monster. Through all his monologuing and rambling, there was one sentence that stuck with me most. You are the material of a king, but continue to play the role of a pawn. I shifted my thinking over to Yubel, pondering as to where it is he could potentially be or what he was doing. I knew that first encounter would not be the last. He would come back, the hatred in his eyes, the way he told Helena to kill me without hesitation, as if I were nothing more than a nuisance. I didn't fear him. No, I could tear his head from his neck without so much as grunting. Rather, I feared what it is he might do to John. or even Jenny, in order to get to me. Not to mention Helena. Yes, she was a bloodthirsty canine cryptid, but was in the same position I once was. That's why I attempted to speak to her at first, to inform her that things did not have to stay that way. She didn't have to be Yubo's killing machine, as I was the agency's. But in this world, not everyone can be saved. I wondered how many other humans or cryptids were out there, being used as nothing more than simple assassins, lied to and manipulated by those who held power over them. I've said before, both man and cryptid can be monsters. And I hunt monsters.